Chapter 11. A Mischief Maker. Everybody was excited as Pete took the film out of the camera. The children and their father crowded around to see the picture. When Pete held it up, everybody began to laugh. It was a picture of White Nose. "Well, I'll be a monkey's uncle," Mr. Hollister exclaimed, shaking with laughter. "We forgot to take the cat out of the cellar. She pushed against the string and the flashlight took her picture." "Say, it's a good one too," Pete said, grinning. "Guess we'll have to try again," Ricky said, sighing. "Let's do it tonight." "All right," Mr. Hollister agreed. After breakfast, he asked if the children would do him a favor between 1 and 2 o'clock. He had to make a speech before the Shoreham Businessmen's Club, which he had joined only a few days before. Since Tinker had to make some deliveries at that time, would the children come down and help? "Oh yes, Dad," they chorused, even little Sue. "That's fine. Glad to hear you're all willing to help." "Dad," Pam said, looking proudly at her father, "it's very nice that the men want you to make a speech." "They hardly know you, John," Mrs. Hollister remarked, smiling. "It's a great compliment." Her husband grinned at the praise. He explained that the businessmen wanted him to tell them about his inventions and how he got his ideas for them. "I guess they just like you, Dad," Pete added. The boy admired his father greatly and had often told Pam that he wanted to be just like him when he grew up. "Well, I know another thing I'm going to mention in my talk," Mr. Hollister said, his eyes twinkling. "What, Daddy?" Holly asked. "You children. I'm going to tell the men how much you've helped me make the Trading Post a success." He kissed them goodbye and left the house. Soon afterward, Holly skipped off to her room. She was very quiet for a long time, and her mother wondered if she might be getting into some mischief. She was about to call her when Holly came downstairs with a squirming bundle in her arms. "Look, Mother," she said, "something I've been wanting to do. Dress White Nose in doll clothes." The pet was dressed in a fluffy pink dress, tied at the neck with a little bow. On her head was cocked a perky blue poke bonnet, and shoes of the same color were tied to her hind paws. By this time, the other children came running to look at White Nose. Holly forgot to hold her tightly, and she jumped to the floor. "Can she walk with those clothes on?" Ricky asked. At first, White Nose stood still. Then she pulled at the dress with her teeth a couple of times. "Stop, White Nose," Holly urged her. "Walk." The cat looked at her a moment, then started slowly off, lifting each foot very high to avoid tripping on the dress. "She's strutting," Pete said with a chuckle, "just like a girl with a new dress." "Oh, is that so?" Pam retorted. "White Nose probably thinks she's a drum majorette on parade." At the word parade, Ricky's eyes lighted up. "Zowie!" he exploded. "Let's have an animal parade, right now." "We could dress all the kittens, too," Pam said. "That's adorable," Sue piped up. "I'll find 'em." She picked up White Nose, saying, "Come on, kitty, show me where your babies are." "If we're going to have an animal parade," Pete said, "perhaps our friends would like to enter their pets in it." "Hey, that's a great idea," Pete shouted. "Dave Mead has a raccoon and Jeff Hunter a duck." "Anne has 2 hamsters," Holly added, "and Donna Martin a turtle." "That would be swell," Ricky said. "And we can fix up the cart like a fire engine. Zip can pull it just like in a real parade." The children scattered in all directions to prepare the animal parade. Half an hour later, the Hollister backyard was full of activity. Jeff had arrived with his duck. Around its neck was a big red ribbon. Dave was leading his raccoon by the collar as the bright-eyed animal rolled over and over on the grass. Donna was trying to get her turtle to make friends with Anne's hamsters, but the pets were not paying much attention to one another. Soon Pam and Sue appeared. carrying the 5 kittens in a basket. Smokey and Midnight were dressed in boy doll clothes, and Tutti Frutti, Snowball, and Cuddly were dressed in doll clothes like their mother. When the girls set the basket down, the kittens hopped out. How funny they looked as they walked about on the lawn, meowing and swishing their tails. Cuddly spied a grasshopper and chased it. The other kittens skittered along behind her as the children shouted in delight. Presently Ricky appeared at the door of the garage pulling the dog cart. What a change had taken place in it. The sides were covered with red paper. Inside the cart was the green garden hose, wound around a piece of log. On the side of the cart hung a stepladder, fastened with 2 nails. "That's neat," Dave shouted. "It looks like a real fire engine." "Now we can start the parade," Pam called out. "Here, Zip, let me harness you." The collie obediently trotted up to Pam, who fastened the leather straps around him. "Zip can lead the parade," Ricky suggested. But Holly and Pam reminded their brother that in real parades, the fire engines came near the end. "I think Dave's raccoon should lead it," Pete said. After a few moments' discussion, it was decided that the raccoon should be first. White Nose would come next with her kittens, then the duck, the hamsters, and the turtle. Ricky would bring up the rear with the fire engine. As the children tried to get their pets to line up, Donna and Jeff suddenly realized that the hamsters and the turtle might not be able to keep up with the others. "Then we ought to put them on a float," Sue said. "Good, let's do it," Anne agreed. "What will they ride on?" "My coaster wagon," Jeff said. The others thought this would be fine, and Jeff ran down the street to his house. In a few minutes he returned with his shiny blue wagon, and the pets were lifted into it. "Now we're all ready to march," Pete said. "I wish we had some music." Mrs. Hollister, who had been happily watching the children from the porch, called out to them, "If you'll wait a moment, I'll bring out the small phonograph." "Let's play the March of the Jolly Puppets," Pam cried excitedly. Mrs. Hollister quickly set the phonograph on the grass and put on the favorite record. As soon as it began to play, Pete called, "Forward march!" The raccoon started off nicely, with the duck waddling behind. White Nose, her head held high, led the procession of kittens. Anne pulled the wagon with the hamsters and the turtle, and Zip walked along with the fire engine, as Ricky proudly held the reins. "They seem to know they're marching to music," Pam laughed as the animals circled the yard. "My duck never behaved so well before," Jeff said. "He's a real marching duck." After the first time around, the raccoon came closer to the phonograph. He stopped to look at the turning record for a moment, but Dave gave him a little push, and he went on. As the fire engine passed the phonograph, Zip turned his head to snap at a bug in the grass. Suddenly, one wheel of the cart banged the phonograph. The needles slipped, making a loud eek! This frightened the duck, who flapped his wings and flew a few feet into the air, landing on the raccoon's back. The raccoon started to run around in circles and dashed through the line of kittens. "Hey, stop!" Pete shouted, but his cry only added to the commotion. In a few seconds, all the animals were racing madly around the yard, with each child chasing his own particular pet. Dave caught his raccoon in the top of a tree. Jeff's duck landed on the garage roof, and the boy had to climb up after him. Anne got her hamsters from under the porch. White Nose and her kittens seemed to be the smartest of all. They had run onto the porch and from the rail sat watching the others. "It was such a swell show," Dave remarked as he said goodbye. "You should have sold tickets to it." After their playmates left, the Hollister children sat down to lunch. Then just before 1 o'clock, Mrs. Hollister drove them all over to the trading post. On the way, Pete whispered to Pam, "Dad must think we're good salesmen. I hope we sell a lot while he's gone." When they arrived at the store, Mr. Hollister told Tinker that the children would keep store. Then he went off to make his speech. Hardly was he out the door when the telephone rang. Mr. Hunter wanted 5 gallons of paint. Would someone please deliver it immediately? Tinker asked the children what he should do, and Pete assured him that they could take care of the order while he made his deliveries. Pete got an express wagon and took the paint to Mr. Hunter. Meanwhile, the other children had taken their places behind the various counters. All except Sue. She skipped over to the water cooler and took a paper cup. She liked to hear the water go gurgle gurgle in the big glass container when she pushed the button. Sue drank a cupful and then pressed the button for another drink. "Don't drink all the water, Sue," Pam called out. "There won't be any for the customers." The container was almost empty, but little Sue said she was very, very thirsty. She took another drink. At this moment, a man came in. He wanted to buy a toy for his son. As the children made suggestions to him, Sue took several more drinks. By the time the customer had decided on a play garage, the water bottle was empty. "Oh dear," Pam said. "Now we're going to have to put another water bottle in." She found one standing nearby. When Pete returned, he pulled the cork out with a corkscrew. Then he tried to lift the bottle into place, but it was very heavy. Pam offered to help him. Together they could barely lift the heavy bottle. It was halfway in place when suddenly it slipped. Crash! It hit the floor and broke into several pieces. Water began pouring out. "Yikes!" Ricky cried. "Look what you did! Dad won't like that." Pam got a mop, and they cleaned up the water while Pete picked up the pieces of the broken bottle. "Looks as if we've been more trouble than we're worth," Pete said ruefully. "I hope we can make a good sale to pay for this damage." No sooner had he said this than into the store walked Joey Brill. "Tell him to go out," Ricky begged his brother. Pete said he could not do this. Perhaps Joey wanted to purchase something. Pete walked up to Joey just like a storekeeper and said, "What can I do for you today?" Joey looked mad. "What can you do for me? You can give me my cat." "I'm sorry," Pete said, "but your cat isn't here." "Then go home and get her," Joey ordered. Pete explained that he could not do that now. He had to mind the store for his father while Tinker was away. "You mean there's nobody here but you kids?" Joey said, looking slyly about the store. "That's right, we're in charge," Pete announced proudly. Joey said nothing, but walked about the store, touching this and that, as if he were examining articles before buying them. Finally, he stood before a table on which were displayed all kinds of tools. He picked up a wrench and turned it over in his hand. Pete came up to him. "Do you want to buy that wrench, Joey?" "No." "Well, then put it down," Pete said. "You shouldn't handle things that you don't intend to buy." Joey sneered. "Try and make me." As Pete reached for the wrench, Joey put his hand back quickly. The wrench flew from his grip and sailed across the store. "Oh!" Pam cried, holding her hands up to her face. The wrench headed for a shelf of dishes. The next instant, there was a terrific crash.